Linda Morrison ruled our HOA with an iron fist until she made one fatal mistake, calling 911 on my wife for illegally carrying a weapon. When 6 officers saluted Detective Maria Santos' badge instead of arresting her, Linda's reign of terror began crumbling. Sometimes karma wears a uniform. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my HOA tried to destroy my life, but I ended up destroying theirs instead. It all started on a Tuesday morning when I found concrete trucks in my backyard. I had lived in Sunset Valley for 15 years. My house was my sanctuary, the place where I raised my children after my husband died in a car accident. The well in my backyard wasn't just a source of water, it was my lifeline. When money got tight after David's death, that well saved me hundreds of dollars every month on water bills. But Margaret Thompson, the HOA president, had other plans. "Sarah, you can't have that ugly well cover in your backyard," she said, standing at my fence with her clipboard and fake smile. "It's against our community standards." "Margaret, this well has been here for 20 years. It was here before the HOA even existed," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Times change, dear. The rules say no unsightly structures. That includes wells." I showed her the paperwork. The well was grandfathered in. It was legal. But Margaret didn't care about legal. She cared about power. 3 weeks later, I came home from my job at the diner to find my backyard full of concrete trucks. Workers were pouring cement down my well. I ran outside, screaming for them to stop. "Ma'am, we have a work order from the HOA, the foreman said, showing me official-looking papers. "This well is being filled for safety reasons." "Safety reasons? This is my property. You can't do this." But they could, and they did. In 2 hours, my well was gone. 20 years of clean, free water, gone. The lifeline that helped me survive after David's death, destroyed. I called the police. They said it was a civil matter. I called my lawyer. He said fighting the HOA would cost more than I could afford. I called Margaret. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry about the confusion," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But the safety inspector said the well was dangerous. We had to act fast." "What safety inspector? I was never notified." "Well, these things happen quickly, dear. But don't worry, you can always use city water like everyone else." That night I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not just for the well but for everything. David's medical bills had drained our savings. The diner job barely covered my mortgage and expenses. Now I'd have to pay for city water too. I was drowning and Margaret had just thrown me an anchor. But as I sat there crying, something changed inside me. The sadness turned to anger. The anger turned to determination. If Margaret wanted to play games, I would show her what a real game looked like. I started researching. Every night after work, I dug through public records, city documents, and HOA meeting minutes. I learned everything about Margaret Thompson and her little kingdom. Margaret lived in the biggest house in the neighborhood, drove a luxury car, and took expensive vacations. Her husband owned a construction company, the same company that had filled my well. How convenient. But the real discovery came when I found the water contract. Our neighborhood's water came from the city through a special contract. The HOA had negotiated this deal years ago, getting reduced rates for bulk usage. Every homeowner paid the HOA, and the HOA paid the city. It saved everyone money and gave the HOA control over something essential, water. The contract was up for renewal in 6 months. And here's the beautiful part. The contract required unanimous approval from all affected parties to continue. One person could stop the entire deal. I kept digging. I found out that Margaret's brother worked for the city water department. Her nephew was the safety inspector who had condemned my well. Her husband's construction company got exclusive contracts for all HOA projects. The Thompson family had turned our neighborhood into their personal money-making machine. I also discovered something else. The concrete they used to fill my well wasn't just any concrete. It was contaminated with industrial waste. They had used my property as a dumping ground for toxic materials, and they had charged the HOA premium prices for specialized concrete. The anger burned hotter. These people hadn't just stolen from me, they had poisoned my land. I couldn't fight them alone, so I started talking to my neighbors. Quietly. Carefully. Mrs. Chin told me about the special assessments that kept going up. Every month something new, she said. New landscaping, new signs, new security systems. Always Thompson Construction doing the work. Mr. Rodriguez mentioned the citations. They fined me $200 because my fence was 3 inches too high. 3 inches. But Margaret's fence is taller than mine. Young couple next door, the Johnsons, were furious about the noise restrictions. We can't have a birthday party for our daughter after 8 p.m., but Margaret's construction projects start at 6 a.m. every Saturday. Everyone had a complaint. Everyone was angry. But everyone was also scared. The HOA had power, lawyers, and the ability to place liens on homes. People were trapped. I told them about the water contract. I explained how one person could stop the renewal. I showed them the evidence of corruption and contamination. But if we stop the contract, won't our water bills go up? Mrs. Chin asked. Yes, I said. But maybe it's time to pay a fair price for honest service instead of being robbed by people who should be protecting us. Slowly, carefully, I built a coalition. Not just against the water contract, but for justice. I took soil samples from around my filled well. I had them tested at 3 different labs. The results were worse than I thought. The concrete contained heavy metals, industrial solvents, and chemical waste. The contamination was spreading through my soil. My vegetable garden was poisoned. The groundwater might be affected. I filed a report with the Environmental Protection Agency. I sent copies to the State Environmental Office, the County Health Department, and the local newspaper. The EPA investigator was a serious woman named Dr. Patricia Wells. She spent 2 days on my property taking samples and measurements. Mrs. Patterson, this is serious, she said. This isn't just illegal dumping, it's hazardous waste disposal. The people responsible could face federal charges. What about my property? Can it be cleaned up? It will take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The responsible parties will have to pay for remediation. I smiled for the first time in months. Can you guarantee that? If we can prove who did this, they'll pay for every penny of cleanup. Plus fines. Plus possible prison time. The next day, EPA trucks surrounded Margaret's house and her husband's construction yard. They took samples, seized documents, and started asking very uncomfortable questions. Margaret called me that evening. For the first time since I'd known her, she sounded scared. Sarah, I'm sure we can work something out. Maybe we can help with your water bills. Margaret, it's too late for that. Way too late. The local newspaper picked up the story. HOA president's family accused of toxic dumping, was the headline. Television news crews showed up. The story spread to social media. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about Margaret Thompson and the Sunset Valley HOA. Reporters dug up everything. The nepotism, the overcharging, the bullying tactics, the special deals. Margaret tried to fight back. She sent me a cease and desist letter. She threatened to sue me for defamation. She called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss malicious attacks on board members. I attended that meeting with 37 neighbors, 2 reporters, and a camera crew. Mrs. Thompson, I said, standing up during the public comment period, you destroyed my well, poisoned my property, and stole money from this entire community. The only malicious attack here came from you. She tried to restore order, but it was too late. Neighbor after neighbor stood up to tell their stories. The meeting descended into chaos as years of suppressed anger exploded into the open. The video went viral. Within days, our little HOA meeting had been viewed by millions of people. Margaret Thompson became the face of HOA corruption across the country. The city scheduled a public hearing on the water contract renewal. By law, they had to allow public comment before approving any changes. I prepared my presentation carefully. I had documents, photographs, lab reports, and testimony from affected neighbors. I had 43 residents ready to speak against the contract. Margaret arrived with her lawyer and a folder full of papers. She looked confident, but I could see the stress in her eyes. The EPA investigation was ongoing. The media attention was relentless. Her perfect little world was crumbling. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, this isn't just about water rates. This is about corruption, environmental crime, and community safety. I laid out everything. The contaminated concrete. The nepotism. The overcharging. The bullying. The cover-ups. Then my neighbors spoke. Mrs. Chin talked about the financial stress. Mr. Rodriguez described the arbitrary fines. The Johnsons explained how they felt trapped in their own home. By the time we finished, the city council looked shocked. The audience was angry. The reporters were scribbling notes furiously. Margaret tried to defend herself. She claimed everything was legal. She said the well was genuinely dangerous. She insisted the concrete was properly sourced. Then I played my ace. Council members, I have a recording of Mrs. Thompson's husband discussing this project with his crew. He clearly states that they're using contaminated fill material because it's cheaper and the HOA won't know the difference. The recording was devastating. James Thompson's voice was clear as he laughed about dumping industrial waste in some lady's backyard. and charging premium prices for it. The contract was unanimously denied. The EPA finished their investigation. James Thompson's construction company was fined $2.3 million and ordered to pay for complete environmental remediation of my property. James faced federal charges for illegal dumping of hazardous materials. Margaret was removed from the HOA board by a vote of no confidence. The new board hired an independent audit firm to review all contracts and expenditures. They found over $400,000 in questionable charges, most of which went to Thompson Construction or other Thompson family businesses. The state attorney general's office opened a criminal investigation into HOA fraud. Margaret faced charges for embezzlement, conspiracy, and abuse of authority. But the most satisfying moment came when the neighborhood water bills arrived. Without the bulk contract, everyone's water bills went up about $30 per month. But the new HOA board reduced monthly fees by $60 per month by eliminating the corrupt contracts and excessive projects. People were actually saving money while getting honest management for the first time in years. The cleanup of my property took 8 months. The contaminated soil was removed and replaced. The groundwater was tested and treated. A new well was drilled, bigger and better than the original. James Thompson went to prison for 18 months. His company went bankrupt paying fines and remediation costs. Margaret was convicted of embezzlement and sentenced to community service and probation. She had to sell her big house to pay restitution. But the real victory wasn't their punishment. It was watching our neighborhood heal. The new HOA board was transparent and accountable. They held public meetings, published detailed financial reports, and actually listened to homeowners' concerns. Property values went up as word spread about our community's transformation. Mrs. Chun started a community garden where everyone could grow vegetables. Mr. Rodriguez organized block parties that brought neighbors together. The Johnsons' daughter finally got her birthday party, a big one that the whole neighborhood attended. People ask me if I'm proud of what I did. They ask if I feel guilty about destroying the Thompson family's life. I don't feel guilty. I feel justice. Margaret Thompson had power and she used it to hurt people. She took advantage of neighbors who trusted her. She stole money from families who were already struggling. She poisoned my land and threatened my health. When someone with power attacks someone without it, they're not just hurting one person. They're attacking the idea that decent people can live safely in their own homes. I didn't destroy Margaret Thompson. She destroyed herself through greed and cruelty. I just made sure there were consequences. The well in my backyard is more than just a source of water now. It's a symbol of what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice. It's a reminder that even the most powerful bullies can be stopped by someone who refuses to give up. 5 years have passed since that concrete truck showed up in my backyard. The neighborhood is unrecognizable, in the best possible way. We have honest leadership, fair rules, and a real sense of community. Property values have increased by 30%. Crime has dropped to almost zero. Children play in the streets again because parents trust their neighbors. Margaret Thompson moved away after her probation ended. I heard she works at a retail store in another state. Her husband got out of prison and works for someone else's construction company now. They lost everything, their business, their house, their reputation, their power. Sometimes I wonder if they understand what they did wrong. Do they realize they brought their downfall on themselves? Do they feel any guilt for the pain they caused? I hope they do. I hope they learn that power without responsibility is just another form of theft. I hope they understand that when you attack someone's home, you're attacking their heart. My well still provides fresh, clean water every day. When I pump water from my garden, I remember everything we went through to protect it. The taste of that water is the taste of justice earned through determination and courage. And every morning when I see my neighbors working in their gardens, taking care of their homes, living without fear of arbitrary rules and corrupt officials, I know it was all worth it. The well that almost destroyed my life became the foundation for building something better. Sometimes the deepest wounds become the source of the greatest healing. That's the real lesson of this story. Evil can be defeated, but only by people who refuse to accept it. Justice can be won, but only by those who are willing to fight for it. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well in a world you helped make better.